Alrighty, I think we're going to get started. Hi everyone. Hello to there's about 5 people that came to our core offices and 4 people now online, so that's great. And it seems that everyone has already turned on their microphone on Adobe Connect, so that's great. We would very much like to hear your voices throughout our session today. So just know that if you haven't, you can click on the phone icon and choose your computer mic to turn it on. And please do mute during our presentation. And so now I'll turn it over to Yemisi to start this meeting.
Thank you, Adrian, and hello again, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our first KMTF meeting of 2016. I think it's going to be a bit louder. Very soft voice. If you can't hear me, let us know. I think it's going to be a very good one. We have 2 very special guests at the core offices with us today. I'm going to start with a very quick run-through of the agenda, just so we all know how the session is going to flow. We'll move into some welcomes very quickly, and then Sarah will take us through her presentation on USAID's approach to OL and KM. We'll then hear from Joan Whelan about how this has been extrapolated to FFT. And then we'll have a question and answer session where we'll pose questions to both Sarah and Joan at the same time. We have a couple of major TOPS events coming up, so Sheila will give us some updates on those, and then we'll close. Okay, so let's jump into some introductions, and we'll start with our guests in the room, if that's okay. Just tell us your name, where you're from, what organization you're from, your role, and if there's anything interesting you'd like to share with us this morning, please feel free to go ahead and do so. So I'll start. I'm Yemisi Songo-Williams. I'm the KM specialist for TOPS, and I am very much looking forward to our KS meeting in 2 weeks. Am I right?
Hi everyone, I'm Adrian Tadella, and I'm the Knowledge Management Coordinator for TOPS and Core Group, and just like Yemisi, I am very much looking forward to the KS.
We're fine.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Hi everyone, my name is Yeji and I'm with Core Vision. I coordinate the COP and the evidence for Core Vision for food community. Also very excited to be
Yeah.
Yeji's one of our presenters.
Oh,
so.
There you go.
My name is Sarah Schmidt, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Party on the USAID Learn mechanism. We will also be at that event at the table discussion, so we are also looking forward to that for those of you who want to hear a little bit more in depth about what we're going to talk about today.
Joan Whelan, Program Coordination Officer, or formerly the Fit for Peace Learning Advisor. That's what I go by day to day. And I'm also going to be at that knowledge sharing event presenting on our new strategy, so also looking forward to it.
My name is Erin Buxbaum. I work on a knowledge and learning project called Nutrition, managed by the World Bank, nutrition-sensitive work, multi-sectoral work, and not just ag and food security anymore, but also social protection pretty heavily now, WASH, early childhood education, and trying to bring all those worlds together as best as we can for learners, which is fun. Yeah, exactly. So 2016, looking forward, we're actually in November, like a seminar series on nutrition-sensitive social protection. We had the first event with Save the Children on November 20th, we're working on getting together a panel of World Bank projects to present on nutrition education in the context of the social protection programs, hopefully in late February, so stay tuned for that, and then things go from there.
And I'm Antonia Wolf, and I am the Knowledge Management Advisor for the WASH Plus project, which is from FHI 360. Our project is ending in July of this year. And we're having a big event at the end of April. So we're gearing up to project closure and hoping there will be an opportunity to bid on the next one.
And please send us information about that. We'll be sending a newsletter for you. Yeah.
So I'm Sheila Jackson, Senior Knowledge Management Specialist at the CAPS program. 13 days from now, we're meeting. That's all I got to say. Online.
Great. Thank you, everyone in the room. And can we hear from our participants online? Can we go in the order of how they're listed in the participant box? Just to make sure they're not.
So, Ashley?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm Ashley Mullinex. I'm the Knowledge Management Portfolio Manager for the Knowledge-Driven Agricultural Development, or KDAD project. So hello to everyone, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you.
Next one is Cheryl.
Hi, this is Cheryl Freese. I work on knowledge management and learning at International Medical Corps. And a recent achievement is we finally got an internal newsletter launched last month, and we've gotten some really good feedback. So it's primarily to share capacity building tools and some internal work, and to highlight the KM work that's happening internally.
Next one is Courtney.
Hi, this is Courtney Calvin, Knowledge Management Specialist for Learn. I work with Sarah Schmidt. And a recent achievement, I would say, is probably our Moving the Needle event that we held in November. That was a learning event with USAID to celebrate CLA.
It was a great event. Thank you. That's that. And also just a little plug, Courtney and Ashley will also be having tabletop presenters. So, no little plug.
All right, the next one is Karen. Karen. Okay. Karen turns on her microphone, but the next one we have is Laura. No? Laura? Okay. Yeah. If you guys check your mic icon up top, you can click on it, and when it turns green, then you're unmuted.
The computer's done that right.
Okay, so you go to...
And
Oh. I've never even...
so let's try Piper.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Piper Sloan, and I work for Save the Children in their Hunger and Livelihoods Department, and I'm a program coordinator for administration, but also knowledge management, so I'm really excited to be here listening to this presentation.
Great, thank you. And we've just heard from Wilbur and Erin, who are having some trouble, so welcome. Courtney just mentioned, and many of us were at the USAID Learn Moving the Needle event in November. And I'm pretty excited because this almost feels like our own personal mini conference. We have Sarah locked in a room with us. And we get to hear more about USAID's approach to organizational learning and KM from her. And we also have Joan here, who's going to share FFP's work with CLA. So I'm going to do very quick introductions of our two guest speakers. There's no way I can do you justice in the 10 seconds that I have, so bear with me. Sarah is the Deputy Chief of Party for Learn. And amongst other things, Sarah works to devise and implement a vision for Learn, manages communications and online learning and knowledge exchange platforms under Learn, and develops and maintains those relationships with USAID PPL, with USAID missions, and other USAID units that stand to benefit from KM and OL. And now on to Joan. Joan is a strategic learning specialist providing support to FFP in development and rollout of the new strategy, strengthening program learning, and improving feedback loops and knowledge sharing across relevant parties. And Joan has been very instrumental in the development of landmark guides, manuals, and other tools that support capture and diffusion of promising practices and emerging evidence. And she's also led quite a few consultative and agenda-setting processes. She's currently a Senior Policy and Program Coordination Officer, long title, at USAID. So without further ado,
Joan also notably was on the startup.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, yeah.
So we as core have so we as core have some kind of relationship.
Okay.
So without much ado, I'll turn it over to Sarah to take us through CLA.
Thank you. I'm going to zoom back. There we go. I think we have a bit of a mixed audience as far as the level of just even knowledge of collaborating, learning, and adapting as an approach. So for some of you, you may be familiar with some of the pieces that I'm going to talk about, but I'm hoping too that we can dive in a little bit deeper when we talk about the maturity matrix that we've developed, which is a framework. There's two resources that hopefully we'll be able to share online, but also I have hard copies here. But then also too, I mean, this is an ongoing discussion, just like collaborating, learning, and adapting, just by sort of the term. We are always adapting as well, improving, being real good stewards of knowledge management in the sense of learning as we're doing, creating feedback loops, and improving the process for which we both promote and sort of educate. So this is just a quick overview of kind of what we're going to talk about, just sort of the why we do this. And again, this is really going to resonate with all of you. A little bit of preaching to the choir, so I'm going to probably just touch on that briefly. Then we're going to spend most of the time obviously on how and the what. And then the next is really just kind of, again, that opportunity to continue the discussion with us and learn, but also yourself. So really, I mean, why CLA people often, and again, you all are good knowledge management stewards, so it's probably part of just what you all do anyway. But oftentimes people feel that CLA is an additive thing, collaborating, learning, and adapting, just like another sort of way of talking about knowledge management and learning. It's something that's additional to the work that they're doing. And the way that we really talk about it, obviously, is that collaborating, learning, and adapting is really just about doing your work better for better development results. So it's about being more effective, more efficient, and really kind of us as a development community continuing to learn as we're doing our programming and learning with our stakeholders and with our partners through that process. And again, you know, that improving performance piece, it's, you know, I don't expect you to sort of read the small print on the bottom, but these are, again, those sort of reasons why you all do knowledge management as well. You know, what often goes wrong is about the fact that data that we have from monitoring and evaluation doesn't get used. It's in report. People don't use them. They're not used for decision making. Coordinating internally amongst either partners or implementing partners in USAID, or again with multiple donors, is not happening either consistently or strategically. Outdated practices still being used. Again, this goes to us constantly testing our development hypotheses. Often we're still using approaches just because this is the way that we've done things before, without actually making sure that those are the approaches that are actually the most effective. Programs that poorly fit their context, again, without taking into account the context within you work. Obviously, we're sort of repeating that cycle, and that's a really common theme also with knowledge management. Again, some of these also are not going to be new to you. That influence is not used strategically. I think that's also when we talk about collaborating, learning, and adapting, and maybe I think for you all the interesting piece is, why aren't we just calling it knowledge management? And why aren't we just calling it sort of strategic learning? We really are talking about a much more holistic approach to this. And when I get to the maturity matrix, you'll see what I mean when we say holistic. The fact that we're looking at both processes that USAID works within, but also the enabling environment that USAID and partners work within. And those are two really important distinctions and sort of key pieces to the framework that we talked about. Shu and I were actually talking about this before we got started, in the fact of, think about it, LEARN is out of the Bureau for planning, programming, thank you, policy, planning and learning. I always want to put programming in there.
I know.
Anyway, and really, it's 5 years old. If you I guess we're going on 6. But if you think about it, collaborating, learning, and adapting as the actual approaches and practices, people have been doing this, since really the beginning of development. For a lot of technical sectors, it's just the way they do work. So systems thinking, for example, it's a natural fit within the environment sector. It's sort of the way that people approach development in general. The real turning point with collaborating, learning, and adapting is the fact that we're actually sort of distilling this and embedding these sort of good practices that are happening in technical sectors to the overarching program cycle that PPL manages and supports. And you can really see here the first sort of learning advisor, which would be your predecessor for you. We really, in 2012. So Lane Pollock, that's right, out in Uganda. She's been really one of the key sort of forces in helping to define what this looks like out at missions, in bureaus, to really have that sort of learning advisor support embedded to carry collaborating, learning, and adapting forward. So when we say collaborating, learning, and adapting, what do we actually mean? Often people, when we talk about collaborating, it is actually different than coordinating, right? This means actually working together. And when we talk about collaborating, it's both internal, so you would say collaborating with each other, and external, so collaborating with partners and collaborating with other donors. And when we talk about collaboration, it's that intentional piece. Again, what I was mentioning before, the fact that, a lot of these practices, people have always sort of, not always, but people have been doing this as good development practices for a long time. The real key pieces I want to pull out here are those sort of second words within each of the C, L, and A. The part that it's intentional, the fact that it's systematic, and the fact that we're sort of effectively doing this with resource. And this is what sort of shifted as an approach within USAID, is that we're saying we're taking sort of these good practices that have been done and we're putting a framework around it, and we are really trying to encourage the fact that we are doing it intentionally, systematically, and that we're resourcing it with positions like Jones. Learning. Again, I'm going to talk you through a little bit more in depth with each one of these when we look at the maturity matrix. But this is really talking about, are we using our monitoring and evaluation? Do we have learning questions? Do we understand our technical base? Are we continuously learning about the sectors within which we work? And then that adapting piece. So this is around that adaptive management. So the fact that we're not just changing course because somebody thinks it's a good idea, but the fact that we are adapting based on evidence and that we're adapting to improve our development outcomes and intervention. Quick refresher for those of you who are not as familiar with the USAID context. The program cycle. This is, again, USAID's approach to programming, and this is really what PPL works to develop, support, and maintain at missions of how do we do good programming and development, right? Learning and adapting is in the middle. It should be done throughout the processes, and it should be continuous. The Bureau is going through ADS revisions, which the ADS is sort of like a handbook for mission staff related to the program cycle. And one of the biggest changes that's going to come out of that is the fact that learning is interwoven through all of those cycles in a really prominent way. So this idea of continuous learning is straight up in front and center throughout, which is a big shift, and that really tells you that the agency is making an investment and sort of really making a point of saying this is something that we are investing in, and this is something that we believe that should be an integral part of the way that we do work, right? So we talked about sort of in general, what is CLA? At times when we talk about it in terms of collaborating, learning, and adapting, and the fact that it should be systematic, intentional, and resource, that's great, but what do we actually mean? How are we actually defining those terms of adapting, learning, and collaborating? And for those of you online, so the slide is a bit squashed, so you may want to just open up the resource that is, I think, on Adobe. And I want to walk you through some of the sections that make up collaborating, learning, and adapting. I also want to talk a little bit, take a step back about what the framework is. So the framework was developed as a tool for missions to be able to self-assess themselves on what collaborating, learning, and adapting looks like in their context. And in order to do that, we wanted them to understand how to sort of talk about the different components, but what it looks like for them. So the maturity matrix is a self-assessment tool process, but it's also a framework to help us describe what collaborating, learning, and adapting is. So the self-assessment tool will be, and we've tested it in 3 missions, and will be available as part of that ADS rollout. And it really walks missions through, again, these sort of different subsectors and looks at what is important for them. And it helps them plan. So basically what it does is it helps them assess where they are in a spectrum of sort of, and we don't use the word even mature anymore, from sort of advanced to nascent. And depending on where they fall, they can make a priority of, look, you know, for us, when we talk about relationship building, we're okay just being in the middle. We don't really feel like we need to be at an advanced stage. But for us, a priority is really theory of change. So this is where we want to make an investment. This is where we're going to look at what activities we want to insert into our CLA plan, which is also now going to be a mandatory piece at that strategy level for each mission. Or we may embed it at monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan, which is going to be required at the project level now for mission. Yeah, and again, these are not fully signed off, but this is the latest version that that is hopefully going to be finalized. And so it really helps missions prioritize action plan and understand, again, sort of what their context, what it looks like in their context. We're not going to have time to delve probably in each one of the sub-sectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly talk about the top ones, and then if people have specific questions on the sub-sectors, we can do that in the Q&A.
Great. I love the matrix. Yeah.
So, and this is morphed, again, being good sort of iterative processes. We went from kind of a traditional almost org chart looking kind of graphic to now this much more color wheel. Choose your own adventure kind of a thing. Which actually the process is a little bit of a choose your own adventure in the sense of what are your priorities, what does your context look like? Because every mission is definitely not the same. But again, something I mentioned earlier is the fact that it really, there's 2 parts to it. There's CLA around the program cycle. And when you talk about for other organizations or for an implementing partner, that would be your own internal organizational processes, right? So how do you, as an organization, a team, World Bank, et cetera, how do you, you know, manage or use pause and reflect moments, such as after-action reviews or stock-taking exercises, et cetera. And then that enabling environment piece. And when we talk about enabling environment, something that's taken from that organizational learning world is that culture piece, the fact that you have to pay attention to what supports good organizational learning and knowledge management. And a lot of that comes from supportive leadership, from a culture of openness, from those you know, non-siloed organizational structures. So it also takes in some of that organizational development world too. And then there's also the resources, right? How are you actually, how is a mission or an organization investing or structured to support that enabling environment? And then also the resources around that. Collaborating, learning, and adapting, this is really just to kind of give you a sense that this is already happening. So this is a map of where we already know collaborating, learning, and adapting is specifically happening in missions. Over 30 missions are, again, doing some form or practice of collaborating, learning, adapting, and using it as a specific approach to their development. And also, too, this is where it includes that missions are investing in people like learning advisors. And what I wanted to do, but we actually don't have time, which I think is fine, but if you would send for people online, there's a link here, and we can send it to everybody. We developed, and actually for those of you who were at the Moving the Needle, you saw that video, of when we talk about what it looks like in the field context, when we talk about collaborating, learning, and adapting. We went out and did sort of a video case study of Community Connector, which is actually, it's a cross-sector integrated program, but part of it is Feed the Future. And it really looks at how do you integrate collaborating, learning, and adapting into a mechanism that really embeds learning and adapting as part of the way that they implement and they work. And so you can see here the screenshot that's on here is the fact that the way that they're structured is that they have intentional 3 phases to their work, where they have a learning phase and then an implementation phase and then they pause, and then they have a learning phase and an implementation phase. And so the fact that the way that they, the mechanism, the contract is being written and the way it's structured supports that, that constant feedback within learning throughout the process. Just to note, too, it's an ag nutrition project.
Yeah, no, I remember. I used to work with Spring.
Yep.
I remember you looked at
This is a really great example of what it can look like in the field, and how USAID is approaching it from that adaptable mechanism, really building it, integrating it into the way that they are doing work. It's a really interesting. It's 7 minutes long, so I highly encourage you after this to go watch it. It's inspiring and interesting. And then for sort of more cases and more examples of what collaborating, learning, and adapting looks like, we did a case competition as part of that Moving the Needle event. We had 57 case competition entries. From 9 sectors, 24 countries. We were pleasantly shocked with the number that we got. We were so excited. We had 5 winners from the competition. We were able to bring in the winners to the Moving the Needle. They presented, and it really does, what it really helped us do and helped PPL do, even for themselves internally, is to put an understanding around when we talk about collaborating and learning and adapting, or even knowledge management sometimes, it seems sort of theoretical or not really, it's hard to make it tangible to people and applicable. And these cases really resonated with people about what does this, when we talk about this, I'm like, oh, this is a great idea, okay, sure, but how are you actually going to do it? This is how people are doing it, and this is what it looks like. And so this is going to be an annual thing for us. We're going to do it every year to really collect those cases and understand what it looks like. And from that, you know, also do our own learning and analysis on, you know, where are the new sort of frontiers, you know, because the people who are obviously implementing in the field are going to be the ones who are going to be probably learning the most. So we need to be learning from them at the same time. So I would highly encourage you to go take a look, and where you can find all of the case competitions as well as the video I mentioned, and a lot of resources, including a CLA toolkit that, again, will be, once those ADS revisions are finalized for USAID, it's going to be an integral part on how the new program cycle is going to be implemented. Those tools are going to obviously be the how we're reinforcing and supporting both implementing partners and missions in implementing CLA.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And we shall share all those links and resources that Sarah's mentioned in a follow-up email soon. I know everyone probably has questions, but please hold on to them. Let's hear from Joan, and then we can take the questions together. So over to you, Joan.
Great. In Food for Peace, I think there's a lot of work that happens that isn't called CLA, and there's a lot of very strong CLA work that predates, can you make the microphone closer? That predates CLA itself. Especially under the current office structure, Dina Esposito, there's been an incredible commitment to participatory approaches, to joint activities, to building in processes for reflection, for convening our staff, and for funding mechanisms like TOPS, which has been around since, I think, 2010 it launched. So, that would be our number one CLA activities, that we've been funding TOPS and benefiting from TOPS' work for years. I'll walk through a little bit just things that we're doing at headquarters, and then things we're doing in the field, and then things we're doing in kind of our systems. As some of you may know, we hold a global meeting ourselves to bring together staff. We have probably 180 staff around the world, and actually probably more than that. And we just held a global meeting, 5 days, 130 staff, meeting out in Virginia just mid-December. So we're still all recovering from that. I know many of you know the feeling. But it's an opportunity to bring in field staff and headquarters staff. We build in lots of social time and lots of, small group discussion time for people to get around the table and talk to each other. But it's also an opportunity to bring in speakers from the World Bank or Cornell, academic researchers, what's the latest evidence base. So that's a really strong mix of evidence-based, field-based practice, looking at obstacles, looking at new opportunities, looking at the changes happening in our work and bringing people together. That's a really big effort. Other big focuses we have at headquarters, it's hard sometimes to break things out into CLA or not CLA, but there's just a huge focus in recent years in joint program design. So when we set about designing a new development program, we're doing so these days in conjunction with the Bureau of Food Security and with the Global Health Nutrition Division. And that process of designing the program, we're each going to have our own funding streams, we're each going to have our own programs, but the initial field visits are done together. Meeting with the mission, it's all done together so that it's done in a collective way where we can look at the mission CDCS, we can look at the resources that BFS are bringing, that Global Health Bureau are bringing, and that we're bringing, and find the best roles for each of these parties and figure out what piece of this incredibly complex puzzle each person can play. And it makes for very complex processes. It means that you are designing a program that is reliant on others and the results they achieve. And so it requires also a new way of working together and new requirements for our implementers in terms of how they collaborate on the ground. We've been a part of a really good example of CLA at the field level, the Guatemala Western Highlands Integrated Program, which is an example of bringing together BFS and Food for Peace and I think Global Health Bureau as well. And that was really designed after the fact, but it's something that shows how you can build in processes of even after award, you can build in processes of joint work planning, joint field visits, joint evaluations that cut across all of these different bureaus and all of the different organizations that may be implementing. So those are some good examples. We're trying to increase, on our emergency side, we're trying to increase the joint efforts with OFDA, and that's a little more difficult because those are always working on shorter timelines and much more urgent responses, but we've got some good examples. One of our case studies that we submitted was about a joint design for Somalia with our office, the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance and the Kenya Regional Mission that oversees Somalia to really look at an emergency response and how we can intentionally build in this coordinated, collaborative work across funding streams. And again, it's really difficult, but I think there's really strong belief within USAID that the collective impact that's possible is so much greater when you do this work collectively and collaboratively and in a coordinated manner, that it's worth the incredible time it takes to plan jointly and the incredible time it takes to line up your procurements as closely as possible, to ask your implementers to spend time work planning together, and it builds in time, it costs more money, but the impact is worth it. Another focus area for us has been, this isn't really CLA, but we have in recent years, as a result of a really large-scale learning assessment we did, the Food Security Assessment 2, that was produced by Santa and looked at, I think, 8 to 10 years of our programs on a program-wide basis. But one of the big findings there was that the quality of baseline and final evaluations was really spotty, so that's something we've taken internally. And now that we manage those processes ourselves, there's a lot more possibility to build in a stronger utilization aspect because we can trust the quality, we know what we're getting, we know baseline evaluations are comparable across countries, they're comparable across implementing partner programs. So there's a real opportunity, and we're really looking at how do we build a much stronger utilization component. So we're getting all this data in. How do we make sure it doesn't sit on the shelf? That when we get a baseline, that there is a workshop where we sit down to reassess with the implementing partner what's the theory of change, how do we need to look differently, how do we need to change our behavior change messages, what kind of adaptations are necessary. Something else we're looking at too, and some of you may know, we're doing, it's kind of like the community connector. We're piloting in DRC and Liberia for the next round of development programs. We're piloting what we call a refine and implement program, so that it builds in a period up to 1 year in the first year after award, where the implementing partner, this is work they engage in normally, but it's creating this safe zone to say, do your formative research, get your people on the ground, understanding the local context, because we all know proposals are written at headquarters and based on really brief field visits. But get your people on the ground, your staff on the ground, developing the local partnerships, identify opportunities you didn't realize were there, understand the challenges you didn't understand, build a relationship with the local government partner, understand what the other donors are doing, and then at the end of that period, that's the refinement, come back and let's discuss the theory of change and the changes you need to make in your program so that we hold you accountable for something that actually reflects reality on the ground. So we're piloting that. It's, again, going to be super complex, and we'll see. And I'm not sure who decided to pilot in DRC, which has to be.
Yeah.
And Liberia. It's like
adding on an extra layer.
But I guess it's kind of that philosophy of it works there, it will work anywhere.
Well, there is integration in DRC.
They are, and it's a mission excited to take this on. We're also piloting in Liberia, so that's a whole new area of just incredible potential, and hopefully we get the right implementing partners in place that can really take this on and own it and take advantage of this period. It's something just as KM people or learning people we hear about. Yeah. We hear, if only there was time to plan appropriately. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Let's see. We're also going to be developing, Food for Peace has a strong history of what was called global leadership in their last strategy, their 2006 to 2010 strategy. And it really laid the groundwork to do a lot of really high-level research around, well, again, this program-wide review, the FAFSA, exit strategies and sustainability, which was done by Santa and Tufts University, which we have final synthesis report on. with some really strong findings that are going to benefit the agency as a whole. Food aid quality review, which really looked at the quality of commodities and how to improve the effectiveness of the food we're providing. And so we're going to be starting a process this year of really taking on a new learning agenda and trying to look at what is it we need to understand better in emergency context, what do we need, how do we follow on and look at sustainability and development context and take that to the next level, what needs to change. Oh my goodness, there's a whole world of topics, and the challenge is going to be turning it into something that's actionable and that we can move forward on and prioritizing. So yeah, I mean, we're a big office. We're a budget of ranges between $1.5 and $2.5 billion, depending on emergency needs on a given year. So we should be doing all of this and more. At the field level, I would say probably the most CLA activity happens in missions where there is a strong focus on CLA. So Uganda, the Uganda mission is the birthplace of CLA, and we've got great activities coming out of there that just, it's because it's part of the culture and the mission. Zimbabwe is another case where we actually, this is our only one, we actually have a field staff, and it's part of his job description, which is amazing. It's sad that that's amazing, but it shows there's promise for that. And a number of field offices that are actually, field staff that are actually, putting in budgets for, let's actually budget for the next year in our operating budget to bring together our stakeholders and all our implementing partners. Or, our regional office might bring together, there have been a few regional lessons learned meetings that go along with times when they bring regional staff together for trainings. Another area of emphasis is, there's donor coordination, and those kinds of meetings are really, you get all the donors in and everybody sits there with a map and decides where they're going to work, and, and it's, so I think, you see different field staff of ours really trying to work with that. It's something that's part of their life, so how do you improve that process and make it learning focused and a real knowledge exchange around what's working and what's not working, and reforms or policy changes that might be needed, and turn it into something a little more tangible. Some missions are doing, sometimes it's in conjunction with program design and sometimes it's in conjunction with other, but, putting together kind of large multi-bureau field visits so that you have multi-sectoral approaches and you have multiple bureaus looking at a program and learning from it and taking that back to where they work. And similarly, we've had several cases of staff exchanges across different, often the impetus was, we have a staff shortage, can we borrow a staff person from this mission? But then people have realized, wow, we learned a lot from that person who came and visited and stayed with us, and then they learned everything we're doing and took it back to their office. So something that had one impetus at the beginning is suddenly recognized more often as a learning exercise, that we should do this for the sake of learning, not just to, cover someone's home leave. At the implementation level, so there's TOPS, and everyone knows about TOPS. We have made CLA, I think we call it something else in the RFA, knowledge sharing, learning, and capacity strengthening, just because collaboration is kind of elsewhere. But it's now an evaluated element of our development RFAs, and I think there's going to have to be an internal process of looking at, okay, we ask for it, what are we actually getting? Are we getting anything quality on the other side? Because that's an important side of it, and how do we need to change what we're asking for? And in the future, we want to look at our emergency programming as well. It's a lot harder to get people to do CLA in emergencies. Yeah. It really is. And so
it's almost where you need it the most.
I know.
And so quickly and,
people are more comfortable if you use language like feedback loops.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we don't have time to learn, but we'll have one feedback loops are really important. Yeah. Okay, we can do that. Let's see. Refine and implement pilot. We've also, this is just another side of kind of knowledge capture. To support support our procurement process, we have something called the technical reference chapters, and it's really just a compilation of best practice documents across different sectors. So there's a chapter on agriculture, and it's not us defining what the best practice is, but it is looking at World Bank or FAO or other IFPRI or other organizations that have best practices in agriculture in ways that are relevant, or nutrition. It has a lot of work from, I'm sure they drew heavily on secure nutrition and the resources you provide, but I mean, it's really looking at what are the globally established best practices and compiling those in one place. It doesn't include technical materials from implementing partners, because we feel that's TOPS's role to compile those, and we don't want to be seen to be favoring World Vision or CARE or SAVE. So we're really looking at organizations like WASH Plus for their technical guidance, or the World Bank, or other multilateral organizations or other kind of globally funded projects. Okay. Pitfalls, dangers of being a learning advisor in USAID. I probably spend 80 to 90% of my time on things that are not developing stronger systems or supporting I've been working in a very CLA kind of way to help develop our strategy. I've been working in a very CLA way to do a lot of things, or look at procurement, or look at, but we're horribly understaffed, and so there's always other things that drop in your lap continuously. And so for the future, we really do, I mean, there's just a continual call for more support from our field staff, from our headquarters staff, for better systems in place. So, I mean, we really do want to focus on strengthening capacity for reflective processes. We haven't had a portfolio review in a couple of years. It's been on my agenda to make sure we have a really good, robust, a quality one where people are really exchanging, they're not just reporting out to each other, but they're really talking about, the obstacles and the challenges in their programs, or the surprising new developments, and really being able to get around the table and identify where we can learn from each other. That's been a couple years now, So we're just looking at how to staff and how to procure, to support, build things into other support mechanisms to start supporting our internal staff a little bit more robustly. So that's a big thing for the future, and to strengthen staff capacity for all these practices so that people can just automatically hold their own after-action review, or have a resource they can turn to that can do it for them. And, I tried to take one on for our Ebola response, and I was told by senior management, like, no, you have too much to do. And then it turned out, yeah, we had this huge global meeting that nobody was working on. So, that's the reality of it, that we're doing a tremendous amount, but there's so much more we need to do. There's so much knowledge that we are just not, like, how do we connect our field offices to each other to share better? How do we understand better what's going on in the field? I think it's something every organization struggles with, but we're certainly still struggling with that part. So that's it. Yes? Yes, sir? Go ahead.
Okay. So no, you mentioned the technical reference chapters. Is that something that's available to the general
it's on our
public?
website.
It's on the website.
Yeah. They're really, they've never been through a good editorial review, so there's weird things with, they don't stop at my desk, so I'll just say it's really weird formatting and inconsistencies, but there's a lot of really valuable knowledge, and it's just a really simple format, because it, nutrition, like, these are the areas of nutrition we work in, and then links in a really, like, a sentence.
Okay.
Describing, and
then is
I
that updated?
Pardon?
How often is it updated?
Every year. We're about to do it again for the next procurement.
Okay.
And most of the updates this year are to add in new sections we didn't have before. Like, we're adding a new section on conflict sensitivity, conflict-sensitive programming, and a new section on infrastructure development, because we do fund a lot of that. And then I think it's an opportunity for people to our technical team to update with, if there's been new guidance issued somewhere that they know is good, then to get it in there. And it's implementation focused, not evidence focused.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, do have a look. And if we're missing Wash Plus,
Do we have anything from online?
just Cheryl wanted to ask Joan if you can share the link to the Somalia case study write-up. You probably can.
Yeah.
Where the link for the
Oh, for the case competition.
Yeah,
Of course,
the case
yeah.
competition.
In fact, if
I don't remember
you go to USAlearning.org, I'll go right back. It's actually one of the banner rotators is that same image that I showed this one. You just click on it and that'll take you to the full collection of the case competitions. And you can just search on Somalia or sort by, yeah. So we'll find that. We'll include it in our wrap-up email.
And Courtney actually just shared it.
Oh, did you?
Good.
So please feel free to ask questions, everyone. We're there now with Q&A. I have one, but I don't want to be rude. But if no one else is ready, I can jump in. Great. So it was really interesting to hear you, Joan, speak about the DRC, I think, pilot and creating a kind of safe zone for implementers. Some of the experiences that I've had is that trying to sell mid-course corrections have not gone down well with funding or different. You know, you submit your work plan, it's approved, you're tied to that, go fetch. You know, how will USAID or FFB reassure their implementing partners that with CLA adaptation really is an expectation that is welcome?
Well, I think for the pilot, it's required, the course correction. I mean, there may be, if someone came back at the end of the year and said, we can't improve on our original design, I think we would, it would be a red flag itself.
Yeah.
So, and I think, you know, CLA is part of the development RFA. I mean, it is specifically asking for that. And to be funded, you need to describe what it is you plan to do at implementation level to make sure that you are, you know, sharing knowledge with your partners within the project, with the external stakeholders, that you are stopping to pause and reflect and adapt as necessary. So, you know, honestly, it does get down to there's work we need to do. It's part of the internal culture.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're not 100% there. I mean, our office director knows it's an issue, that there are, it's part of standardization that has to happen across project management. You know, we have, I forget, like over 60 projects at any time. And so you have a lot of people feeding in. There are activity managers, there are AORs, and, you know, if there is, I had somebody say to me, one of our activity managers say to me, you know, one day, well, you know, all of this, like, collaborating stuff, it's just taking money and time away from implementation. It was like, don't, you know? And so you need to have a leadership culture internally that is making sure there's a clear message. You need to have standards across, you know, and I think you can always speak to that as well, Sarah, just like the work that PPL is doing at the mission level. Like, how do you establish, and you need to have a culture in the mission that, thank you, with the openness, the relationship building, there's a tremendous amount of trust needed.
And there's a lot of education, and this goes down to that program cycle and even that ADS guidance. And mind you, the ADS guidance, and really that's a handbook for mostly program officers, but the program officers in missions should be supporting technical staff and also setting that tone on how you do programming. And there's a big education piece of adaptable mechanisms are totally possible. And that's also big education for OAA, for contracting officers, because often that's where we have seen that there's that conflict of a contracting officer saying, no, you have to have a deliverable-based contract. And there are a lot more options out there.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, single word IQCs. There's the example that you just gave with this refine and implement sort of already built in. We're an objective-based contract, not a deliverable-based contract. That's another way to do it. So there are a lot of options out there, but PPL is very aware that it's going to take quite a lot of time to build that capacity out in missions with the program office, with contracting officers, and with technical staff to have them understand what are your options. First of all, what's your objective for this, activity, and how does it feed up to your sort of higher level project? And then, okay, what are your sort of objectives? And then choose the mechanism that you think is going to be the most appropriate to support that objective, right? Often that happens in reverse. They automatically go to the mechanism, and then they think about the objectives, and then it doesn't fit together, right? And so it's just even changing how that process happens. And that's, again, one of the things that when they were doing the stock taking for the current version, I should say, of the ADS, that they really found is that they were literally reading the letter of the law and saying, oh, well, no, when you design an activity, it has to stay this way, and there's no adapting, you can't, which is just not.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hi, this is Isada.
Who?
Isada?
Knowledge sharing meeting?
Knowledge sharing, KM Task Force meeting?
I'm sorry?
This is the KM Task Force meeting. Were you joining us?
Oh, this is for the TOPS USAID grant meeting.
No, I think you be on a different conference line.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. They must have given me the wrong conference code.
No problem.
Not a problem. That's okay.
Thank you.
It is a tough.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting. Sorry.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. But a long way to say that I think you are correct, and that is a pain point for implementing partners, especially for implementing partners who want to do this adapting, and that the culture right now at USAID hasn't caught up. But
it hasn't. I will tell a story of the most extreme case. I worked in PPL a few years back in the earlier days of CLA, and I was on a mission for a CLA TDY, and I was meeting with, he worked in global, he was a health officer, M&E officer working in health in a particular mission, which shall go nameless, because I was completely shocked when he asked me, he wanted some advice, like, do you think it's okay if I talk to the implementing partners about their M&E results? Isn't that collusion? And I was like, oh my dear, oh my goodness, like this job is much harder than I thought it was going to be. That if that's your starting point with some of your staff, that it would actually be illegal or wrong to talk about why they achieved the results they did, or what might need to change as a result. I mean, that's just, and that's so extreme, and I really haven't encountered that anywhere else. But but it was there. I mean, this was a person in place managing significant resources, and
Are you saying then that the RFAs or the procurements that are coming out now, you said they have a CLA requirement? No, so they may. And it depends on how that procurement has been written, and it depends on if a mission or a team is sort of CLA, not like a general agency-wide requirement. And down at that level, no. So the ADS, the current version, collaborating, learning, and adapting is in there, but not as sort of specific. The revisions that are currently underway, the emphasis is much more of making it more emphasized throughout, but the specific components would be, there's a strategy level that all missions are required to have a strategy, and at that level, you are required to have a PMP. And within that PMP, the idea is that you should have a CLA plan in place at that strategy level. And then below the strategy, there's the project level, which is sort of integrated activity. So if you draw it out, you've got the strategy way up here, and then you have a pad kind of here, and then you have multiple activities or mechanisms that feed into one pad or a project. Yes, right. So the two requirements are at the strategy level and at the project level. And at the project level, it's a monitoring, evaluation, learning plan. That's required. The hope and what really
PPL doesn't have as much say in that activity level, but the hope is that obviously when you're doing a monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan, they're going to trickle down those sort of indicators or those learning agenda.
Right? The M&E component's always in there. But
emphasizing the fact that learning has to be a part of your monitoring and evaluation because, and if you look in there's actually monitoring, evaluation, and learning right in there in that learning circle. So that you do have things like a learning agenda that supports your theory of change, and a learning agenda should support even okay, what do we need to know? And that should help you even prioritize your monitoring and evaluation, your indicators, your evaluations that you want to plan, et cetera. Helping you to know, okay, what do we need to know, and then how are we going to find that information? Well, let's do an evaluation. Maybe it's an indicator that we can monitor. Maybe it's a political economy analysis. Maybe it's a
it's a learning meeting where we bring together stakeholders.
And exactly. So not required in the RFAs at this point, but it depends on the technical office if they're bringing on full force, like FFP. Again, some of the missions, Uganda. Definitely, it's written into most of their requirements. And then also what we're seeing now, too, is a lot of missions are popping up with monitoring and evaluation learning mechanisms to support them. So literally to help their activities and their mechanisms integrate that learning piece and that monitoring and evaluation together.
So when you say mechanism, can you give me an example? Hiring an agency to help them?
No, like a contractor.
What we call a project.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So, for example, I know one was just, Uganda has one. They have a learning contract, right? It supports their entire mission in collecting evidence, monitoring, supporting the mission in these learning type events, after action reviews, et cetera. We know Honduras just had one. I know Liberia is planning that. I mean, there's a lot of missions that are starting to pop up with these types of mechanisms to support them. Where in the past, they were mechanisms to support, South Sudan. MSI has a mechanism that they're adding in. CLA is now a big component of it.
Okay, so we have a few questions.
Sorry.
Move on online, yes? You want to?
Yeah, so Scott has a couple of questions, actually. I'll start with the first one. For both Joan and Sarah, have you been able to put learning on par with compliance, results in par with compliance? How have you been able to do that? And it would be great if you have some examples.
Both on par with compliance.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he means by that. I don't think they ever will be. They're not the same thing, so we don't.
And I mean, I think for us, compliancy around learning, right. I guess for implementing partners, the fact that they would be compliant to do learning, right? If that's the question, then in some ways...
Have you been able to put learning on par with compliance?
Can you ask him to clarify?
Yeah.
I definitely think you're getting there. I think it means that we have to show results as an implementer, and so how are we going to have to show learning as significant that we have to show results?
And that's a really good, interesting question. I mean, I think in some ways maybe you can talk about the either WIP or the one that you're piloting, the refine and implement, where obviously you do have to show in the sense or community connector where it's so specific. I mean, I'm guessing that they have to actually produce some reports around that learning phase before they go to then the implement phase again. So that would be one way of showing or requiring or proving that you're learning. The larger question that we're grappling with as part of Learn is how do you measure learning, right? This has been a question that for KM even has been a big question. How do you measure knowledge management? And so we have a couple of activities underway to help look at how do you develop tools to help you measure what that actually looks like. And then our largest learning question for us that we share with PPL is, what is the evidence base for CLA? Does it actually improve development outcomes? Does it trickle all the way down? Can we show that attribution not in a direct line, but can we sort of triangulate the fact that investing in this actually does improve development outcomes? It's a long-term sort of, obviously for us, we have a sort of whole study around it, and it's it's a big question. It's, like I said, it's our number one learning question that we have. And maybe some approaches are more effective than others. Obviously, that's going to depend on the context, et cetera. But still trying to make some attribution to this type of an approach on increasing the effectiveness of development.
I was once asked to demonstrate KM's contribution or
all the time.
No, really.
It is
because it's the
Right.
Yeah, it's so hard, and I feel like this is, if we can crack that nut, we would be doing a huge service. Send me promises. Like I say, we're working on it. But it's an interesting question, right?
And we have a few more minutes for some questions. Should we take one more from online? Sure. Do we have any?
Yes. From Scott again. Has your efforts in promoting CLA had an impact on recruiting and hiring practices? Is USA deliberately hiring learners? And what is that profile?
Great question. Kind of an example of a profile of what that would look like at an agency. Yes, we have seen an increase in the number of learning advisors that missions are investing in, right? So that's a good indicator. We're hoping that number increases. There are more opportunities for missions, different types of mechanisms for people to hire those types of, procure those resources, both through ourselves, but also we have a cousin mechanism, MECAP, which is Monitoring and Evaluation Capacity. CAP is small. Anyway, I don't know what type of rest. And they're doing something called Learning Fellows, and so they're starting with the first cohort of sending out 2 people to different missions to be learning fellows, learning advisors. So we are seeing an uptake, and there is a sort of a little bit of a general scope of work for what a learning advisor is. It's internally shared on ProgramNet, which is the internal sort of knowledge management platform for PPL, but writ large for the agency, supported by them. And there's, if a mission's interested, there's a scope of work they can easily kind of adapt and put out for procurement.
And more broadly, I just wanted to address more broadly, it would be wonderful someday to get some element of CLA embedded in everybody's JD, just as a core competency.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I mean,
and embedded more into the training systems. Like, how do you onboard and make sure that every foreign service officer? I know PPL does do some of that, for the orientation sessions that they do. Presentations, but it's just building that idea that it's a core competency that everybody should have, and then there are specialists that can support it.
Just adding on that, we're actually developing a competency framework for all our staff. So there's the KM competency 001 and 101, and this is actually really helpful in terms of framing. Like what behaviors you want to see, what are the skills, competencies you want to see.
That's great.
There's one question I have on that in terms of using CLA for integration or cross-sector collaboration. The current model we have at our vision is we have like this KM framework or strategy or approaches per sector, and like each sector is organized around the community of practice, like youth has one, health has one, that kind of thing. Do you think that works better in terms of like, I think that it's pros and cons, but in terms of building technical evidence base, that has been our preference. But we have discovered that kind of creates its own silos in a way. And so our immediate approach is to connect the KM people in those sectors and like they collaborate. or would you prefer the approach where you actually do this organization-wide and then like build component subsectors?
Oh my gosh.
Do you have any preference or experience one way or another that you can speak from?
My personal experience, I have seen it both ways.
Okay.
I think a lot of it does depend on the organizational culture, right? I mean, I think if it's an organization that already has a tendency to be siloed, I would say that that just helps reinforce it, and you're going to sort of have these walls that are harder to break down. If you're an organization that naturally is very good at sort of, you're already integrated even in the, you know, where you sit and how you function, I think that they could be fine, right? But I think that silent question is a really good one because I think, and add to this conversation, but there I think are the approach of integrated programming is not internal to USAID. There are pros and people are on both sides of the fence, right?
Yeah.
It hasn't necessarily been proven when we talk about actual programming that integrated approaches are the best way to go, right? And I'm sure it's going to be like anything. It's going to depend on the sectors that should be working together or should not be working together, or personalities, or, I mean, you know, lots of things to name it up. So
there are areas that, I mean, food
naturally
security
fit so well together. Yes, of course.
or, you know, nutrition
and
wash and
wash.
I mean,
there's a lot of evidence out there
Yeah.
to show that integrating those components is yielding better
Yeah.
results.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah.
and that you can't improve food security only looking at one sector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just requires it. But I was going to add on too. I think that how you organize, how you integrate is going to depend on how you're organized in the first place. Years ago, I worked at Chemonics, which was organized by region. And they had a very thriving practice network, and they invested a lot of money in it. It was really, really quite good. Then their challenge was, how do we integrate people so that they had sectorally focused or issue-focused practice networks or communities of practice. And so that's important because day to day people were discussing things about the region and coming together around the region across their roles, but they weren't talking to each other about nutrition or post-conflict programming or whatever the topic is. Whereas at AUD, people were it was organized by, Antonia and I both worked in the global health, GHGN.
Still exists.
It still exists, and you're both,
Right? I mean, it operated almost as like a mini.
Yeah, we're pretty solid by project, I have to say. You know, and having the experience of working at JSI, I think they did a little bit better of sort of integrating their staff, and you would hear about other projects a lot more. But pretty
AUD
siloed.
was not good at that.
Yeah, I don't think
And then
it's any better.
it was hard enough to know about who else was in the global health sector, let alone, I mean, there were things happening in livelihoods that were really related to my work that I had no idea the projects were even there doing, and, you know, evidence being built, and
First step would be choosing some themes that are cross-cutting anyway to get people sort of thinking outside of their technical sphere. So, like, water, sanitation, and health is a great example of just a natural kind of fit.
agri-nutrition.
Agri-nutrition is great. Another great, I mean, so some of those that are naturally kind of collaborative anyway, trying it out as a model.
We're realizing that how KM is shaped actually has an influence on how integration happens. So that's a really good.
Great, thank you. So a very big thank you to Sarah and Joan for sharing their insights into CLA with us today, and for really helping us to kind of gain a shared understanding of what it's about and see how we can be more intentional about it as we work. We have quite a few questions from our online participants. I hope it's okay for us to get these together and share them with you, and then we can share them with a wider audience so everyone can benefit from that. There's a question for you as well, James, which we'll ask later on. So very quickly, Sheila, do you want us to give us some updates?
Sure. So things that are just happening, in case you haven't heard, there's a knowledge sharing meeting. About 80% of the people who are involved in this meeting right now are somehow involved in the knowledge sharing meeting, so I want to thank you for that. I think it says a lot about KM and our task force when you guys are all rising to the occasion to put together something else, so we appreciate it.
So for those of you who aren't, you're still in there, please come support us. Got some great sessions going on. Joan will be featured in plenary. Dean Esposito is our keynote speaker. So registration cutoff is Friday, so get on the website. If you need more information, please let us know. We'll get to that. Also, one thing that came from the task force, how to develop a KM strategy workshop. We are still continuing to develop that with our consultants. We do have dates. It will be March 1st through the 3rd. We will be opening up registration first. It'll be opened up to the task force first. 21 people, so if the task force takes all 21 spots, we don't advertise it anymore. But like I said, because this comes to a task force, very much our product, we want you guys to have first pass on it. And then our next knowledge management task force meeting will be in February. We'll be putting that together for you guys, getting some information. I don't want to hint at what it might be at, just in case it falls through, and then I get your full stuff. But otherwise, if you have something you want to share, please let us know. More than happy to put you in the KM Task Force spotlight. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think you've just wrapped it up right
Okay. Oh yeah, one thing as usual, we will be sending out a wrap-up email, everything we'll put on the website if you want to review and also ask for questions. We really appreciate it. Great. All right, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. See you next month or sooner at the end of this month. So, yeah. Bye.